Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. I know I've been a little bit lax on making these videos lately, but I've been so busy with ladder. I finally did hit level 95, which was pretty cool, and I'll be working on level 96 soon enough. But I wanted to knock out a couple of these videos before I got started into the grind. So today we're going to be talking about the skill Vengeance. Now, Vengeance is one of those really odd abilities that most people just don't understand, and it has a lot of unique rules and things that literally have caused me quite a bit of headaches trying to figure everything out. As well as many of the viewers will always come in and say, "Why aren't you using X?" or "Why aren't you using this?" or "Why is your main weapon this weapon?" or "Why don't you have this piece of equipment on?" or "Why aren't you using this charm?" or such and such, and I have to explain the intricacies and the way that Vengeance works. So how does Vengeance work? Well, first let's go over the ability. So it says fire, lightning, and cold damage are added to each successful attack. It says my current skill level is level 33, so obviously I've got this pretty high. Attack rating bonus of 340%, which arguably doesn't matter. Fire damage 374%. We also have a cold damage of 324%, cold length of 20.4 seconds, with a lightning damage of 384%. And you might be asking, well, what does any of that even mean? Well, we also have synergy bonuses. So we got resist fire plus 10% fire damage per level, resist cold plus 10% cold damage per level, resist lightning plus 10% lightning damage per level, and salvation, which is all elements by 2%, so 2, 2, and 2, which is of course going to be 6% per point. But it's going to be 2 fire, 2 cold, and 2 lightning, which is not bad. Now, unfortunately, it's not possible really to beef out all the synergies on Vengeance. You have to spend 20 points on Vengeance itself, which is the most cost-effective form of building up the damage. Then you have to spend 20 points into each one of these to get it to maximum, so that's 40, 60, 80. Then you have to spend another 20 points on Salvation, which is 100, and that would only leave you with 15 points to basically spread around, or is it only 10 points to spread around to the rest of your abilities, and that just doesn't work because you also need to put 20 points into Conviction, or at the very least enough so that it hits level 25. Mine's not min-maxed right now because I had to I share equipment between all my characters, and for this video, I literally just slapped some equipment on him, so he actually has more plus skills than he normally does. What you're looking for is level 25 on Conviction. I think I already have a video about Conviction, so we won't talk about that today. But we will talk about what it does in connection to Vengeance. Now, you see all these passives, and you see all these abilities to build up Vengeance, but what does Vengeance itself do? How does it work? Okay, so basically how Vengeance works is it takes your base damage and it adds lightning damage on top. Okay, so it's not like Fire Arrow and Cold Arrow or Berserk, which convert your physical damage directly into elemental damage. This is a little bit different. How this works is you still get your physical damage. So whatever your physical damage is, it's still there hiding underneath the surface. So if we were to switch to a regular attack, you will notice that I do have 802 to 2,300. Of course, I have the enchant running from the demon limb, which isn't very much fire damage, but it's about 802 to 2,300 physical damage. I might have a little bit of extra like cold damage here and there, and these things are definitely not going to hurt anything. Having a little bit more elemental damage is certainly nice, but it's not going to increase the damage of Vengeance, really. Because what you have to understand is the way that Vengeance works is it works off of that physical damage. So the higher I can get my physical damage, the higher Vengeance can actually hit. Now, the problem with this, though, is that Vengeance ignores a lot of different types of damage. And one most notable source is grief. So whenever you put a grief on a character, grief is a special type of plus damage that is not considered min and max. It is something else completely. And it usually reads something along the lines of damage plus X, right? And it's available on more than just grief the rune word. It is also on like the Redeemer. It is on Astrion's Iron Ward. There are a lot of different items that have the damage plus X modifier. This does not work on Vengeance. However, it will still give you physical damage. So at the very least, it can help the physical side of things, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Deadly Strike does not work on Vengeance. Open Wounds does not work on Vengeance, and Crushing Blow does not work on Vengeance. Now, the important thing to note here is that even though Deadly Strike, Open Wounds, and Crushing Blow do not affect the Vengeance damage, they still function on the physical damage portion, the 802 to 2300. So you will still get the Deadly Strike proc on the physical damage effect. You will still proc Open Wounds, despite the fact that it has no effect on Vengeance. And you will still proc Crushing Blow with the ability. However, there are things that do affect Vengeance. So let me go over the things that do affect Vengeance. So the first one right off the bat, the most important one, is the on-weapon ED, not to be confused with off-weapon ED, which has absolutely no effect on Vengeance. On-weapon ED is the most potent form of effect for Vengeance. So that's why the best weapon for a Vengeance Paladin is generally a Breath of the Dying Berserker's Axe, because it has such a high on-weapon ED, as well as the ethereal form beefs up another 50%, which gives it a little bit more damage on top of that. Strength, unfortunately, does not affect it, even though the strength is technically part of the whole calculation. It does not affect it. On-weapon min and max damage will affect it. So if there is min and max damage on the weapon, and like I said before, this is not to be confused with Grief's effect, which is not min and max. So Grief's plus damage is not considered min-max damage. It has to actually be min-max. This actually affects it. We also have min and max in the form of off-weapon. Min and max can actually work. So for instance, there is charms that have plus max damage. They will have a rather drastic effect on the Vengeance damage. Let me see if I can show you here. So as you can see, I'm at 2,726 to 7,929. And if I put on this charm, you'll notice I go up pretty much about 100 for just like 10 max, which is very, very nice. And that's why you see a lot of my charms are, in fact, plus max damage charms. I also have combat skills, and combat skills does, of course, affect the damage as well, because, of course, Vengeance is affected by the combat skills. So when I put on the combat skills, I go up one level in Vengeance, and that adds more to the conversion, which is, of course, also going to have a pretty nice effect. Of course, if you don't have anything to convert, it's not really going to do anything for you. Now, the beauty of Breath of the Dying with this build is that it's such a high damage weapon, a high physical damage weapon, that the life and mana steal can actually come into a play. And this is a little bit of an issue with Vengeance, because Vengeance does have a rather low physical damage aspect, which means that when you're in there and you're hitting stuff, you're not getting as much life or mana steal as another player normally would. So having a high physical damage combined with the high life steal and mana steal on Breath of the Dying actually works out really nicely for this build. Vengeance also requires... Oops, I accidentally played that. Vengeance also requires Conviction to be extremely useful. And I said we'd talk about it in its connection to this. So Conviction reduces the resistance of all monsters nearby. Now, because a Vengeance Paladin gets no bonus from Concentration or Might, and very little bonus from Fanaticism, Fanaticism will not increase the damage of Vengeance, but it will increase your attack rating and will give you an attack speed bonus, which could come in handy if you were trying to speed up your Vengeance as quick as possible. And Vengeance is not exactly a super fast ability, so it doesn't necessarily hurt to have Fanaticism. But the issue is that Conviction is the real money behind the Vengeance ability. Tying together Vengeance and Conviction allows you to hit just really, really hard. Most monsters that you will come across will tend to have extremely low resistances, at least in one of the three categories. Because it's negative 150%, and most monsters tend to only have about 50% resistance to any particular element, you're talking about basically any monster you come across tends to have negative 100% resistance in at least one category, which means that you're dishing out a pretty large amount of damage to that target, no matter what. And this is one of the beautiful things about Vengeance, is that it doesn't matter what monster you come across, it doesn't matter what boss you come across. There is nobody who is immune to everything that you're dishing out, because you are dishing out physical damage, you are dishing out fire damage, you are dishing out cold damage, you are dishing out lightning damage, and the combination of these four elements together makes it so that when you go into a battle and you start hitting monsters, you will notice that there is pretty much nobody who is going to stand against you. There is some issues with Vengeance, however, and one of the things that I've noticed with Vengeance is that, number one, it's a very single target ability. As you can see, I have to hit every single monster individually. So it's not like I can just go into battle and be like, okay, well, like a sorceress, and just throw a firewall down and kill like 10 targets, or a Javazon where I can throw one javelin in and I can kill like 10 or 12 targets, or maybe even 100 targets in one javelin. I have to physically go up and tap every single target, and you'll notice that I'm not doing poorly. I mean, every single target that I tap generally is dying, and this is the beauty of the ability, because I have this huge amount of damage of all sources. I can break any element that I come across except for cold, and if they are not immune to cold, I am making them extremely susceptible to the cold damage. And it's interesting to watch, because when you see a monster that's immune, if I take my conviction off, I can show you this. Let's see. So these monsters right here are immune to physical, and it doesn't matter, of course, because the conviction paladin doesn't care about what you're immune to. I can't break a physical with conviction though. Let's see if I can find another target. These guys are immune to nothing. I had to come to the one place where monsters are not immune to any elements. These guys are immune to cold, and I don't believe I could break them. Usually you can't break cold immunes, but it looks like I can break these. Interesting. They must be only just barely cold immune. And you notice that the cold immune status disappears off their name. One of the best places to see this, I found, is Darkwood. When you go to Darkwood, there's all these monsters. Some are lightning immune, some are cold immune, some are fire immune, etc. And they just tend to be all over the place. See, these guys right here are fire immune, and as soon as I toggle on conviction, notice they are no longer fire immune. I have broken their resistance. And Vengeance is a very big ability that uses conviction. So you've got to understand the rules of conviction in terms of your ability. And I have a whole video on conviction, and like I said, I won't be talking about it specifically, but these are the negative resistance modifiers for conviction. So if you have conviction, it's negative 150% resistance at max. It is 20% effectiveness versus immune, so keep that in mind. So it means it only reduces an immune by 30%. So you're going to need an additional reduction. But the beauty of Vengeance is that you don't really need the additional reduction, because most monsters can only have 2 immunities at any given time, which basically means that at any monster that you fight, there's always going to be one immunity or one resistance that you will be ripping down to negative 100%, because they're not going to be immune to every single element. And I've come in my time to really, really enjoy the Vengeance Paladin. And the reason why I really enjoy the Vengeance Paladin is just because he has a almost unstoppable killing potential. Yes, he cannot kill extremely quickly, but when he goes to a place with multiple immunities, like fire, lightning, ice, physical, like all of the above, he has absolutely no problem rolling through every single monster he comes across. I've also found a very unique respect for the Act 3 mercenary. You might be shocked and in awe to find out that I run an Act 3 mercenary, and he is a very powerful ally in my quest. Let me go ahead and sell a couple Dole runes. I don't have enough. Oh, I have gold right here. Never mind. I was about to sell some Dole runes. Are actually pretty valuable, and I find them all the time, so I never really worry about it. I have an ally that I've recruited in my quest, which is my my ice mercenary. So you have to think that if you are a character who has conviction aura running non-stop, why pick a melee mercenary? Why not pick a mercenary who can take advantage of your ridiculous auras? And that's exactly what I did. I built myself a very nice ice mercenary for this particular character. Now, at the time when I built this ice mercenary, they had not buffed up the Act 3 mercenaries yet. And so I was going off of the old version. I might actually, at this point, switch him over to lightning or fire. I'm not 100% sure. But the reason why I chose ice was because one of the problems that I have as a Vengeance Paladin is that I kind of get overwhelmed by monsters because, as I said before, I do have to tag each individual monster in a row. And so having somebody there who can freeze the monsters, give me a little bit of crowd control is certainly not a bad thing. And as you can see, I put a Spirit Conquest Sword on him. He has a Ethereal Skin of the Viper Magi socketed with a Cold Facet. He has a Ethereal Spirit Monarch. He has an Ethereal Nightwing's Veil, all of which adds up to a lot of potential damage. And it's just another way that you can make your Vengeance Paladin, your own. I do believe that if I had to do it over again, I've already got all his equipment and everything, so I'm probably not going to rebuild him at this point. But I probably would have picked the lightning one, I think, because lightning is much easier to break with conviction, and it would just be a much more interesting choice. But as you can see, in a place like this, you're not seeing a lot of immunities. These monsters who normally have immunities, like the Urdars, and and whatnot, they don't have much of anything going on. My ice guy over here is just absolutely excellent at taking on targets. He's actually extremely survivable, especially with the conviction aura. Like he just shreds things. He actually does even decently in Players 8, which is quite amazing. The only monsters that I've ever had an issue with my Vengeance Paladin have been monsters that are basically immune to everything. Physical is definitely one of my weaker points. So when I come across a monster like the Pit Lords in the Uber Zone that are immune to literally every single element except for physical, those are a little bit of a challenge for me. But usually what I end up doing is switching to Smite and going with Crushing Blow and things like that, which is perfectly doable. I usually have Smite on my Z key. But as you can see, like the amount of damage that I can put out is kind of nuts. And I actually had thought about maybe even combining my Godzilla build with this so that I could add another element into the mix. But the main issue with the Vengeance Paladin is just those massive skill point investments. You really have to invest 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, and it's just too many points to fully invest. And so there's no way to go into the Holy Bolt tree as well. Now, when it comes to the leveling up a Vengeance Paladin, it is a little bit of a pain in the butt, and I'm going to tell you guys why. The Vengeance Paladin is extremely, and I mean extremely, dependent on his weapon. So the weapon that you choose for a Vengeance Paladin has a huge effect on how that character rolls. And I don't really, I can't really explain it well enough. Let me actually go back to town here real quick, and I'll show you what I mean. And as far as like equipment goes, let me see if I can actually find something. Actually, you know what? Here we go. Here's a ghost wand. It's an ethereal ghost wand with 30 to 60 one-handed damage, right? So if I'm not wearing a weapon that actually has any real damage, you'll notice that my vengeance is pretty garbage. It goes off of that weapon so much that literally if I don't have a good weapon, I'm pretty much just begging for a garbage attack. I mean, 1,500 is nothing compared to 7,966. And this is, of course, how you would level up your character. 30 to 60 is actually probably a halfway decent weapon for a low-level character. And as you can see, I'm still not doing, like, absolutely awful, but this is with max level conviction, appropriate plus max gear, all sorts of things like this that I've got running. You know, I have the charms, which are giving me plus max damage. I've got tons of plus to skills. I've got, tons of things going on my character, like the minimum damage from the ring, which, believe it or not, adds tons of damage. Watch as I take off the ring, and you'll notice that I go down by nearly, what, 100 points of damage just from that 7 minimum. And that's the reason why I chose this ring in the first place, was because of the minimum damage. You're going to find that when you come across items very specifically geared towards your Vengeance Paladin, you're going to get really excited about it. You're going to be like, oh my god, that's a ring with plus 10 minimum damage, plus 10 maximum damage, you know, lifesteal, attack rating, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to get excited about it because the Vengeance Paladin is a weird beast that requires some very strange items. Now, Vengeance really doesn't really have a lot more going for it than that. You just have to remember that Vengeance is plus min and plus max damage on weapon ED. Your weapon is the most important thing for Vengeance Paladin. Off weapon plus min and max will work. There is even a pair of boots. It's called War Travelers. I actually have a video up on War Travelers, and I actually demonstrate this during the video. War Travelers has a plus min and max damage on it. And when you put War Travelers on, it adds almost 300 to 400 damage to your Vengeance, which is freaking nuts. Now, I usually choose to go with the Crushing Blow, the Deadly Strike, and the Open Wounds, specifically because physical damage is my weakness. So I like to build up that physical damage weakness, so that the elemental side doesn't really need that much love. The fire damage, the lightning damage, the cold damage that comes from Vengeance, I don't really have to worry about it that much. In fact, I think there's actually a point at which I could probably min-max these, and I think I have. Because one of the things that I did was I specifically went with a higher amount of fire and lightning, specifically because fire and lightning are more likely to break than cold. And as you see, I only have 6 points in the resist cold one, which is basically so that I have the max resistance, which I don't have right now because my gear is wrong. But basically, I kind of min-maxed how I wanted my character to sort of like engage with this particular kind of ability. And let me show you how my mercenary runs with this particular build. As you can see with the Conviction aura, he actually doesn't do too bad. Man, they really buffed up the Inferno. Let me take the Elite out of the picture. And he can pretty much just stand there, and he can just kill most monsters with the Conviction aura up. It's pretty impressive. He was even impressive before they buffed him up, and after they buffed him up now, he pretty much just wrecks. But I definitely think he could be swapped to the Lightning one now that they've added Static Field and all sorts of interesting things to it. And that's one of the things that I've always talked about when it comes to mercenaries, is that you pick the mercenary for the character. Everybody always comes into my channel. They always come in and they ask, which one's the best mercenary? What's the best mercenary? Which one do you choose? What's the one that you're using? Because I want to copy the one that you're using. But it's not that simple. If you're a Vengeance Paladin, there are special considerations. If you're a sorceress, if you're a necromancer, if you're a druid, there are all these special considerations that you have to keep in mind. As a necromancer, you're trying to find the mercenary which buffs up your army the best. But you're also trying to make sure that you have a companion who can actually kill things. Because as a mercenary, those bodies hitting the floor are very, very important. As a Conviction Paladin, I had very special considerations. I needed somebody who could help me with crowd control. I needed somebody who could help me with elemental damage, because I had a huge Conviction aura which could help kill monsters. Now you see, these monsters are cold immune, and I cannot break them with Conviction. So even though Conviction is up, you notice that the cold resistant is not being broken. But the other two resistances that they have, fire and lightning, are at negative 100% at this point. So when I tap them with Vengeance, you notice it's really quick. And as you can see, I have a very quick Vengeance, but Vengeance is not a quick ability. I have increased attack speed in my shield. I've got increased attack speed in my helmet. I've got increased attack speed on my High Lord's Wrath. I'm running increased attack speed on multiple sources. So I mean, it's something that you've got to work on with Vengeance, because to make it even to get to this level, you need a lot of increased attack speed. What am I running right now? Probably pretty hefty amount, 150%. Of course, some of that is handled differently. So on weapon, increased attack speed is handled differently than your like your helmet increased attack speed, so forth and so on. So yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I left out when it comes to Vengeance. It's already been a 24-minute video on Vengeance, and I didn't really intend for it to go this long. Let me pause for just a second here, and I'm just going to think if there's anything else that I have left out. Yes, I did forget something. Mana cost. So Vengeance has a very high mana cost. Vengeance's high mana cost is something that you're going to have to deal with. And if you notice, at level 33, it is a 12 mana cost ability. Now, in contrast with something like Zeal, you notice Zeal's mana cost is only 2. Charge's mana cost is 9. Blessed Hammer's mana cost is 8.2. I mean, when you look at the mana cost of skills, 2.8, I mean, Holy Shield's probably the only thing that even comes close, and it's probably not even anywhere near, you know, the amount of spamming that you would do. Yeah, so the mana cost on Holy Shield is 35. So about the only ability that I've got that even comes to a challenge on Vengeance's mana cost is Holy Shield, and it's not an active use ability. And this is kind of an important consideration, and it's something that I really definitely didn't want to leave out. It's basically because you can run out of mana relatively easily. So before, remember when I was talking about how the physical damage side of Vengeance is relatively low, and it doesn't get beefed up at all, but it is still there. Okay, because you have your physical side, and then Vengeance is buffing up your physical side into elemental damage, and then combining the two together. So you essentially have damage that's split up into 4 parts. You have 1 part physical, 1 part cold, 1 part fire, and 1 part lightning. So at any point you are hitting with all these, but only the physical damage can steal life and mana. Right? So when you're in a situation where you're trying to, you know, dish out your damage with your Vengeance ability, you're going to be burning up tons of mana. And I've actually had problems on the Vengeance build on many occasions where I just didn't have enough mana steal, or I didn't have enough mana to continue using the ability. And it actually is a real problem with this ability, because you need a high amount of physical damage, and you need a decent amount of mana steal to be able to maintain your mana consumption rate. And you will find yourself in situations like in the Ubers, or fighting Bale, or fighting monsters that steal your mana, where you just are going to have 0 mana in your bar. You're always going to need some mana potions to kind of like restart the engine, so to speak. Now, as long as you're hitting, and as long as your hits are connecting, usually you're fine. Another thing that I did leave out, which I was not talking about before, is Conviction's negative defense. Now, I have almost never come across a situation where I needed attack rating on Vengeance. And the reason for that is because Conviction also applies a negative 94% defense, which means that most monsters that you come across will have relatively no defense whatsoever to actually combat your attack rating. Now, the only time that this does not work, besides PvP, it doesn't seem to work in PvP, besides PvP, is monsters that also have Conviction. Okay, so if you come across a monster that is aura enchanted with Conviction, you are not going to be able to hit them, because Conviction cancels Conviction. It cancels it on a level per level basis. So if I have level 25 Conviction and they have level 20 Conviction, only level 5 Conviction will make its way through. And this is very interesting, because in any situation that you come across a monster who's running Conviction, you lose the negative defense ability, and your attack rating has to stand on its own. So Uber Diablo, any monster that has Conviction running, even another Paladin with Conviction in PvP would cancel each other out. This canceling effect only works on the Paladin, from what I understand, so not the other people that are around you. And then this is one of the reasons why having a higher level Conviction than level 25 can actually be useful, even though it stops actually working at level 25, because when you go up against someone like Mephisto, who has level 20 Conviction, and you have level 30, you'll still be applying a level 10 Conviction to Mephisto, which is still very useful. Otherwise, you would only be applying a level 5 Conviction to Mephisto. I found this to be extremely useful in the Ubers. I would just run Conviction and cancel out Uber Mephisto's conviction completely for myself, and it was it's actually really handy because it not only does it cancel out the negative resistance, it also cancels out the negative defense, which makes it a lot easier for me to stay alive when I'm fighting him. I think that's pretty much everything. 30 minutes on Vengeance sounds about right. You guys might be looking at this, might have looked at this video when you first saw it, and you're like, well, that's a really long video. I want a skill that probably nobody uses. But Vengeance is just one of those odd abilities that really requires a little bit of explaining. And if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them down in the comments. I will be more than happy to answer. Vengeance is definitely one of those odd abilities that requires some learning process, a learning curve. So don't be ashamed if you don't understand how it works completely. Feel free to make some comments and ask some questions. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when it's 30 minutes on Vengeance. And keep watching.